Alright, so today we'd like to talk a little bit about the electronics. So I finally figured out a good way that I could get some good screenshots of the electronics. Ranger Tug actually outfits the boats fairly well in my opinion. There's a Garmin 8612 chart plotter, it's got autopilot, there's a VHF radio, I've got a XD radar from Garmin. All integrated. There's a Neiman 2000 bus that ties all this stuff together. Even the Fusion radio is all integrated with the chart plotter, so I can run the Fusion radio controls directly off the chart plotter. It makes it a multifunction display. So what we're looking at here is this is my favorite screen. When I boot when I get down to the boat and I turn it on, this is what I see. So maneuvering watch, I do that if I'm going in or out of port. It looks just like the icon here, so I get a little bit of sonar, I get a small section, which is usually I zoom in for close-up stuff, and then I zoom out on a much bigger picture, so that way I can see two different distances of where I'm traveling as I navigate in and out of a harbor somewhere. I've got cruising, where I do two sets of radar overlays side by side. We'll talk more about that. I've got some illustrations to show. Cruising is running the dual radar. It's one set of radar, but it's on two different screens. I actually found myself zooming in and out a lot with radar as I was using it, and I found it was more practical to have one side of the screen that's like a half a mile, a quarter mile, and the other side of the screen is like 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles. The effective range of the radar, without getting into too much detail of it, I've done a bunch of research looking into the radar that came with the boat and whatnot. 4 miles is about what the effective range of it is. Obviously, it's going to go further, but radar depends on how high it is on the boat and how high the other boat is that it's talking to and how much energy it has to throw out in the airwaves and stuff. But in general, 4 miles is about the effective range of it. And that's a pretty good distance anyway. It's more than adequate. So if I'm cruising, which means I'm doing 25, 26 knots in general, then I'll have this up. The single radar overlay is if I'm going slow speeds with radar running. Chart and sonar obviously is kind of along the line with fishing or looking for a good spot to go fishing. I've got another fishing one that gives me the shading as well as the sonar as well as the navigational charts. Obviously, navigation charts, you're always going to use that if you're just getting from point A to point B. Fishing chart, if you're looking at the substructure under the water, trying to find a good place to go fish, or drop crab pots, whatnot. And then I've got my weather. I've got my media for the radio because I do have an XM, it's a GXM weather antenna for Sirius Radio XM. It gives me radio and it gives me weather. But the radio controls end up happening through the Garmin chart plotter because it comes in that way. And the weather was really what I was after. And through this presentation, I've actually got pictures of, I'm going to show you screenshots of what the weather looks like, what the radar looks like, and then some of the other gauges that I've created, like the fuel gauge right here. I've modified that dashboard quite a bit, which we're getting to. So let's move on and see what the electronics look like. So this is my fuel dashboard. So when I click the fuel button right here, this is what I see. This was actually a default config, but none of the widgets actually connected to the right thing. So I went through and corrected all that and reorganized stuff. So I got my total fuel left in the top left corner with my range. Those two numbers seem to kind of go together. Here's how much fuel I have. Here's how far it thinks I can go. This is the total odometer on the boat. I never reset that, so from when I got the boat, that number just keeps incrementing. It's not a trip odometer, that's an actual odometer for how many miles we've traveled with the boat thus far. Top right hand corner, I do total economy, and I do everything in nautical miles because it goes with knots, and wind is always given in knots, so I keep everything in the nautical miles, how many knots I'm going to travel. And then my total fuel rate, 3 gallons per hour, that kind of goes well with the total economy. Coolant temperature and oil pressure for the engine, it's important to pay attention to those. And then obviously the speedometer right in the middle, measured in knots. Fuel gauge, is a visual gauge, 89% left. And then this is the trim angle on the motor. So obviously I'm doing 7 knots, so I don't have the engine trimmed up at all. Keeps track of how many gallons I've used, and this is resettable per trip. And here's a percentage, the same as the trim over here. Voltage, so unit voltage, this is the voltage that the Garmin sees, which is technically the voltage coming off the house bank batteries. And then engine voltage on the left, right, which comes off the engine instrumentation. Current GPS position, this is helpful if I ever had to call the Coast Guard or talk to somebody on the radio, give my coordinates. It's an easy place to go and read that. And then lastly, the depth in the lower right hand corner. All right. You know, I keep a logbook of all my fuel that I burn. I actually file with the state to get a refund on the gas tax, and to do that, I've got to keep a log of what I actually use and keep all my receipts, and just for interesting, for fuel efficiency and what it's actually costing me on fuel for the boat, I keep good logs of that. So what I found was easier when I'm filling up for gas. I don't have time to write down a logbook because you're at the fuel dock. You want to get there, get your gas, and get off. So when I pull up to the fuel dock, I bring this screen up and I just take a photograph of this with my phone, because it's got the current engine hours, which I need recorded. It's got how much gas that I used. It's got how much I have left. That tells me how much I got to put in on the at the gas pump, and it's accurate within a gallon. It's amazing how accurate the fuel consumption usage is. So I know how much I got to put back in. And then I'll get the receipt for filling up with gas, and then later in the evening or the next day, I can bring up the picture I took, and it'll say, here's how many, here's what my engine hours were, here's what my fuel usage was, and I can log all that in the book. So looking at the same dashboard, if I was going fast, this is what it looks like at 25 knots. So obviously I've got the engine trimmed up to 17%. The voltage has dropped a little bit because we're using things a bit more. And let's see, fuel's dropped a little bit. Fuel efficiency is down to 1.47 nautical miles per gallon. So miles per gallon is always going to be a little bit bigger than that number. Just so you understand that. Let's see, on the engine display, there was some default dashboards that Garmin had already set up. So here and again I went through and actually hit all these widgets and put in actual numbers and headings and stuff that actually made sense to make them usable. The one I use the most is obviously this dashboard. Usually if I'm going to, if I'm navigating by sight in or out of a harbor, I've always got this display up. But I use these every once in a while too. So this is going 7 knots. This is what it would look like at 25 knots. So here's your engine voltage, house voltage. Here I've got bearing and course, my range, how many gallons of gas I got left, fuel I've already used, my total fuel economy, engine trim at 18%, and then gas gauge 86, and then the odometer. Another engine gauge. Some people, if you like gauges, I went and did this one as well. These were like the defaults in there, but none of them actually aligned with the engine instrumentation, so I spent some time to fix all of that. So I've got engine, it's a oil temperature over here, oil pressure over there. I've got trim. I've got that's battery voltage for the start. That's the engine battery. I've got RPM, I've got speed, fuel flow, engine hours, and fuel gauge. And same thing, but now we're doing 25 knots at 4,700 RPM. This was a more basic display. I actually did this one initially for doing my screenshots for capturing fuel, because I had both my battery voltages, so when I was on the hook and I didn't have my battery monitor, I looked at this screen all the time. It was a quick and easy way to get my battery voltages. Also told me what the engine hours were, the total odometer, trip odometer, fuel used, and then the date. So here in again, this made it really convenient when I would go to the fuel dock, take a screenshot of this, and then I could look at the picture the next day, and it gives me the engine hours and the fuel used, the day when I put gas in. So here's some screenshots of the actual engine. So compared to what the factory publishes on the Yamaha engine statistics, this is actual life with us with a fully loaded boat. We don't spend a lot of time trying to say, hey, you know, should we leave the kitchen sink at home this time, or should we bring that too? We don't care. We just throw it on the boat, right? So we're probably weighted heavier than most. I don't like to leave port without a full tank of gas. I don't like to leave port without a full tank of water. So the boat's usually fairly heavy, so my numbers are usually not as great as what the factory spec sheet was, but they're actually not that far off. The Yamaha spec sheets say that the R27 will do 1.9 miles per gallon, you know, at about 20, I want to say it's 25, 26 knots-ish. It's about 30 miles an hour roughly. And we've hit that a couple of times on some good flat water and some good seas. So it is fairly realistic. So this right here is showing 1700 RPM. We're doing almost 7 knots, and we're moving 2.5 gallons per hour, and we're getting 2.5 nautical miles per gallon. Really good fuel efficiency to be able to do 7 knots. I speed it up. I get up on plane doing about 4400 RPMs. The boat pops up on plane at about 4200-ish. It likes about 4500 in general. But even at that, it's 1.7 nautical miles per gallon at 4400 RPM at just under 15 gallons per hour fuel flow. This is really great to see, especially on a boat that weighs 7,000 pounds. And here I'm moving 25 knots. And this 25 knots is actually pretty important to us. And we live out of Everett. So to get to the San Juans, I can get to the San Juans in under 2 hours on a boat ride, which means I can get there and back in the same day, obviously weather permitting and so forth, but it's nice to have that extra speed to be able to do that. That was one of the reasons why we did the outboard instead of going with an inboard. Up the RPM to 4600. The economy drops to 1.5 nautical miles per gallon. Fuel flow goes up another gallon per hour. Speed's about 24 knots. And here I modified the trim a little bit. So I always do either 2 dashes, sometimes 3, it depends on the condition. I usually will start with 2, get up on plane, and then I'll look at what the economy's doing, and I'll do minor adjustments from 2 dashes to 3 back to 2. Just to see where the economy level's out. And that's usually how I drive most of the time is I'm balancing the economy with the speed with the RPM. So on this screen, talking about the radar is what I wanted to focus here on real quick. So this I've got a course set. I'm doing 7 knots, so it's slow speed. So you see it puts the boat in the center roughly of the image, right? So, and this is my radar screen where I have it split. So on the left-hand side, I'm looking at a half a mile. And on the right-hand side, I'm looking at a 2-mile radius. So this gives me the long distance view. So any objects that are way up in my path, you know, that I may not be able to see looking across the water will show up on the right-hand side. And anything that's in my immediate, I need to be really concerned about them, within a half a mile is going to show up on the left. Right. So the other thing is, because I'm doing 7 knots, my boat's fairly centered in this picture right here. What happens if I want to go and do 26 knots? Well, now my boat has moved to the bottom quarter of the screen because I'm moving fast, so I care more about what's in front of me than I do what's behind me, because I'm moving along at almost 27 knots. So this is called, there's a feature in the chart plotter that you have to turn on to get it to do this. Otherwise, you're doing 27 knots and it's going to center you in your radar picture. So the way you do that, all right, is you go into settings on your radar and look for radar appearance, and you'll see look ahead speed. The Ranger Tug, I set it to 18 knots because if I'm going faster than 18 knots, I'm pretty much on plane cruising. And what that does is that tells the chart plotter if your speed is equal to or greater than 18 knots, then it's going to take and move the position of your boat from the center of the chart plotter to the bottom 25% of it to give you more room to see what's in front of you. So I highly encourage everybody to turn that feature on. And radar, this is an FYI, I run radar all the time, day or night, rain, fog, doesn't matter. It's good to get used to it, to understand it. You know, there's some things that might happen in looking at your chart plotter as opposed to as your radar, right? So GPS is not accurate down to, you know, the foot, right? I mean, it's got a margin of error. I looked it up on Garmin spec sheets, and they say that expect your GPS to be within 15 meters of accuracy. Well, the RT27 is a 10-meter boat, so we're smaller than their margin of error on the Garmin GPS as far as accuracy goes to GPS. So that's 50 feet, right? 15 meters is what, 49 foot technically. Radar, on the other hand, doesn't ever lie. Radar sends a signal out, and it gets a return, and it's a reflection off of an object that's real time. So radar is not going to lie to you at all. So if you look like here in this picture, you know, I can see the radar right here shows a clear edge of the island that lines up with this. Well, this tells me that the chart's off by a little bit, right? And that's probably because the GPS is accurate to 50 feet and the radar is accurate, period, right? So for something as wide as this channel is, it's not that big a deal. If you were crossing a channel that was maybe 50 or 75 foot wide, you know, 100 foot wide, this potentially could be a big deal. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where radar is telling you one thing and your chart plotter is telling you something different, trust radar first, because the GPS is not nearly as accurate as the radar is going to be for the image it shows. But it's also good to run radar all the time just so you get used to it, because that way when you need it, and you can't see, like in the fog, it's really important to understand and use it. This last summer, we ran radar quite a bit. I mean, San Juan's is known for getting fog in the morning time especially. And then we actually had all the smoke from the fires come in, and we spent a whole weekend up in the San Juans in that smoke. And there was times when I don't think we had 100-foot visibility in front of us. And then other times where the fog would give us, you know, maybe a quarter mile to a half mile, right? So running with radar was actually, it's a really nice to have. You know, it lengthens the time you have on the water and doesn't make it as scary worried about running into other boats out there. So look ahead speed, highly recommend you go and enable that. Other thing I was going to talk about too is on the right hand column, Ranger Tugs actually set this up for us, and I really liked what they did. It was a great idea. On the right hand column, configure your coolant temp, oil pressure, economy, fuel remaining, GPS speed, and depth in this order, top to bottom. What this does for you is put your engine key metrics, right, your temperature of the engine and the oil pressure in the top right corner, because if there's a problem with the engine, you know, like it starts overheating, you want to see that as soon as possible, right? So you always want to be paying attention to that. Your economy, you're going to want to look at, because that's how you're going to tune the trim of the engine, right? How much gas remaining? Nobody wants to run out of gas in the water, so it's important to always see how much fuel you have left. What your speed is, right? We're always curious what our speed is going. It tells us how quick we're going to get somewhere. Also kind of helps with what your total economy is as you adjust for that. And then depth, we don't ever want to run aground, right? So whether I'm looking at the sonar, whether I'm looking at radar, whether I'm looking at a course, whether I'm looking at the navigation charts, as you flip from screen to screen to screen, this can all be custom for every screen. You make it the same for every screen. Any screen I jump to, it's the same instrumentation on the same right-hand column. That makes it very convenient as you jump around from screen to screen, that you're always looking in the same spot for the same numbers, because we do not want our engine to overheat, and we do not want to run aground, and we do not want to run out of fuel. Really good advice to have it set up that way. Talk a little bit about weather. So I added the GXM satellite weather antenna. This is what it looks like. So if you have your cell phone, you have LTE, you have a tablet, and you use apps like Windy, you know, I use Boat US. I use a ton of different weather apps on my phone because I get all kinds of great information that way. Windy is probably the best one I like to look at because it'll give me hour per hour predictions. I actually paid for the subscription for Windy because it wasn't all that expensive, and it's a fantastic application. The problem with all of those applications, though, is they're all on my phone, and my phone needs LTE data for any of those apps to work. And what I found is when I jet into certain coves and certain harbors, boating around San Juans and other parts, sometimes I don't have great data. Maybe I go from from LTE down to 4G, or maybe I just don't have signal at all. And for weather, I'm looking for, you know, is this a good time to leave? What's the weather gonna turn into? Wind is the biggest thing that I worry about the most. I'm fortunate enough that we've got a cabin with a heater, you know, so if it rains or it gets cold, that's not going to affect us too bad. But the wind's certainly going to delay our plans, you know, depending where it comes and when it comes and so forth. So using the GXM weather antenna, I get satellite information on what the weather is. What we're looking at here is wind speeds around the area. Right, so this is showing me 7 knots out of Everett, 6 knots up here, 3 knots here. But this gives me a good sense of what wind is. The arrows give me a sense of what the direction is. This is not nearly as interesting or as accurate as windy is. It's a good high-level overview as to the direction the wind's going to be coming, you know, and what the speed is going to be. So if as opposed to I have nothing, this is much better, right? But if I have my choice to use windy, I would use that first, right? It'll also show me precipitation, you know, and rain, which is kind of fun to do. It actually animates it. This is what that looks like animated. That way I can see which way the weather's moving. That's somewhat helpful as well. And here again, you can get all these apps on your phone, but that just means that those apps, it means you have to have data connection on your phone for any of that to work. I can also point on the certain parts of the plotter and find different cities and bring up what's the current weather conditions in a particular city. Like here in Everett, when I took this, it was 44 degrees, wind was from the south, it was 7 knots, right? You know, pretty good information to have here. You know, maybe the port I'm going to, I want to know what the weather conditions are there. It'll also bring up marine forecasts. So here and again, I can get these on my phone, but if my phone doesn't have data, then this is great to get this. Alternatively, you know, you can get these weather forecasts by listening to the VHF radio on one of the weather stations, but here and again, you gotta listen to it, wait as it goes on a loop, wait for the area you care about to come, and then try and, you know, remember what they said as far as the wind conditions go. To me, it's more convenient just to, you know, look at the chart plotter and say, today south winds 5 to 15 knots, becoming 10 to 20 in the afternoon. That says I want to travel in the morning, not the afternoon. Right, wind waves 1 to 3 foot. That's not too bad, not ideal. You know, tonight it's building, wind waves 1 to 3 foot. Wind waves 2 foot or less. This is you know, the next day in the afternoon, 2 foot or less. A chance of rain in the morning. Just another way to get to that, to get to the weather data should your phone not have signal. And here Tuesday night, wind waves 2 to 4 foot. I probably want to avoid that. Usually I look for anything well less than 20 knots. You know, 15 knots or less is ideal to be out and about. And a screenshot of the third page of that. This one I wanted to bring up too. This is the 3D underwater view. I actually use this quite a bit. Not only does it actually look cool, when I'm out crabbing and shrimping, this is pretty instrumental to me because I can get a quick look, and you can actually turn this around on the chart plotter, spin it, you know, to get a different look at it from a different angle. And it shows you the valleys and stuff underwater. So when you're setting a crab pot or a shrimp pot, you can see how steep the slope is, and if you set your pot there, the pot may tumble and go down. You know, so there's often times like with shrimp and a crab, and I'll look for these slopes, and I may set, then I'll look at the depth at the bottom, and I may look and run the pots right at the bottom of the slope, or I'll look for something that's not as steep to set my pots on. It just ensures that I don't lose my gear. It's also like with shrimp, usually they like to come from the deep water and run up the cliff. You know, and then you want to put your pots somewhere on a ledge or whatever for the shrimp to be able to come up to. So you can use this to help kind of find that terrain underwater. Really useful especially for shell fishing. I use this quite a bit. And this is the alternative, is if you're just using conventional chirp. I always recommend you use chirp. You know, that's a lot better technology than using the conventional 50 or 250 kilohertz sonar. And here, you know, this is showing, you know, just a steep drop off, but it's not nearly as informative as what this picture would show. And once again, I like to point out, so there's my coolant temp, my oil pressure. I put time of day in here because I didn't need speed. Actually, not speed. I didn't need fuel efficiency because I'm fishing. And you know, the time of day is important because if I'm looking at this, I'm probably dropping a pot, and I'm like, what time is it? And then I'll think 60 minutes is when I got to pull the pot, right? And since I didn't need fuel efficiency when I was fishing, I replaced that with time of day. But other than that, I kept fuel. I don't want to run out of gas. My speed, 7 knots, and my depth. I don't want to run aground. Right, same order of metrics to look at, you know, on my instrumentation. And here we go again. If I'm doing split sonar with navigation, right? So this is the fishing chart showing the underground. You know, the narrow lines are steep as far as being a little bit more flat with the depth readings and so forth. It's just a side-to-side view, and that's it. And hope you'd enjoy this. If you have any questions, please be sure to leave those in the comment section below. And again, thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of Down at the Dock. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you. And don't forget to hit the bell for notifications.